Whoops. Good afternoon. Welcome to a special edition of Fired Up. Today is Sunday, and I am in studio with together with my favorite attorney, Don Green. There is so much happening in the world of magazine bans and Supreme Court appointments and so forth and so on. We just literally can't keep up with it on a daily basis. So I invited Don Green in to go over some of the issues from the legal standpoint that are in the news today, and for all I know will change tomorrow. We simply can't keep up doing this show other than doing one every day. So here is my favorite attorney, Donald J. Green, to talk about some of the issues that are current in our suddenly different things every day.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Bob. And I want to thank the studio and staff at Rigel Studios in Las Vegas, Nevada for allowing us to make this production. The emphasis of this show today is to show some of the most significant and critical points concerning the firearms world legislation, which affects Bob's viewers and listeners in Nevada and California. And again, this is part of our plan that we've introduced the past several months to literally bring the gun show to you, because this is what we'd be doing at gun shows. Some of this material today is very timely. We're talking days or even hours old. Some of it is a few weeks old because we've had to constantly verify some of the information which we are presenting today. I want to caution you that the very first slide we have today has some disturbing content with it, and I'm going to be asking Bob some specific questions when it comes to self-defense. May we have slide number 1, please? Bob, this is the shooting in Wisconsin. This is with that young man, 17, 18 years old, who's now charged with murder of a protester of some type, and it's caught on video. Now, his attorneys, I'm sure, are claiming self-defense. It remains to be seen exactly what's going to happen and play out. As I understand it, there are 2 states which are involved, Wisconsin and Minnesota, involved in something of the extradition process and the prosecution of this young man. Let's watch it for another moment.
Hey, he just stopped them. Hey, dude right here just stopped them. Dude right here just
And we can see what appears to be a young man walking with what appears to be an AR-15 type rifle. And this is in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He's being followed by a person with who's making this broadcast. There are the police. The young man is raising his hand. The police are driving right by. And of course, this is what happens in real life. The police don't know who the shooter is. They just see a young man walking around with what appears to be a legal firearm, at least in that jurisdiction. So he's doing the right thing, raising his hands, which is what you should be doing. I'll ask Bob a question about that in just a moment. And we see, and of course, now the video stops. Thank you. Now, Bob, let me ask you this question. We see this young man possibly involved in a shooting. Now, from a concealed weapon instructor's point of view, tell the audience what this young man has done right, or maybe what he has done wrong concerning the actual use of that firearm, and perhaps immediately right after the use of that firearm.
Well, when the police arrive, the second half of the tape, when the police arrives, he puts his hand in the air. He's clearly not handling the gun with his hand on the grip or anything like that. When he brings the gun to a protest, allegedly to defend himself or others, from a legal standpoint, I'll leave that up to you. From a practical standpoint, it's legal to do. The gun is not concealed and so forth. We learned after the event that he's 17 years old, which may or may not make it legal under that state's laws. Maybe you have researched that. I have not personally. But he's doing everything right. If he's carrying a gun and he's underage, and let's say that worst case scenario, he shouldn't possess the gun, it's illegal, and yet then someone attacks him and is trying to kill him, is he allowed legally to shoot in self-defense? Legally, I'll let you address that. Morally, we've addressed this before with prohibited people using firearms to defend themselves, juveniles shooting a home invader. He's a juvenile, 16 years old, just did that recently in a case I'm featuring next week, where he grabs a gun, which is illegal for him to do, and stops a guy from beating his mother to death. Of course, he can grab that firearm in legal, reasonable defense of himself or others if his life is in danger. Still, could he be charged with possession of a weapon by an underage person? Yes. Would a jury likely convict him? I can't see it ever happening. People who are prohibited people grab firearms all the time and use them in legal emergency self-defense situations.
Here's what I tell my people. You can't take a gun to a gunfight. So is this a situation where, let's say it is legal in Wisconsin to carry a firearm or to possess this type of firearm by a 17-year-old male? Bob, is there a problem there when the weapon is used? Like, have you taken it to become involved in a gunfight?
He apparently took it to use in self-defense if that issue came up. The correct solution would be not to go there at all and not to bring the gun and watch it on television like the rest of us. But once he's there, I'm sure he didn't expect someone to try to murder him. The gun was a just-in-case kind of thing. But we're getting into the legal aspect on one side and the thought process on the other. What was he thinking at the time? Well, he shouldn't have been doing that. But once he's there, does that mean he has to let himself be killed because he brought the gun? I find that to be a ludicrous argument.
So do you think that we're going to see more and more of this type of behavior when it comes to, let's say, an otherwise lawful gun owner?
Well, we see these all the time. We are having a huge uptick in crime because of the lack of police response in major cities and the fact that we're not taking the bad guys to jail anymore because of political reasons, or there's too many of them, the police are outnumbered, whatever. More people are finding themselves victims of home burglaries, home invasions, assaults on the street. Where is it reasonable to be carrying a gun? Sure. I mean, I don't have a concealed carry permit in Washington, D.C., but if I went to Washington, D.C., would I carry my gun? Yes, I would. I don't plan to go there. But would I carry the gun if I had to go there to defend my life with? And if I get arrested, that's, I'll try and talk my way out of it in court. Yes, to take a gun wherever you're going, in my view, right now, is plain common sense.
So let's go to the next slide. The young man is arrested. The young man is arrested, and he's charged with the crime, possibly in 2 states. I heard that he was charged in Wisconsin with the murder and possibly something in Minnesota with something about crossing the state line or something. But on this slide, it shows that as of the other day, $1 million was raised in the GoFundMe. Now, this $1 million is to go to his defense. Bob, does it matter how much the defense is if you don't have the facts to support your case?
No, but the money simply enables you to hire better lawyers. Presumably the legal team that you can buy with $1 million is better than the legal team that you can buy with $50. I mean, we're in a capitalist society. Do the smarter lawyers, because they win more often, have better investigators, have more experience in how to select juries, et cetera, et cetera. The high cost lawyers generally are the ones who win more cases. That's why they charge more, because they're more thorough in their arguments.
Let's look at it from this perspective, Bob. You and I discussed in a previous show about the McCluskeys. That is the lawyer couple in St. Louis who were defending their home. The woman had a pistol and the man had an AR-15 type rifle. Now, are we seeing an assault on homeowners and legitimate gun owners? Are we seeing an increase in that?
Yes, we are. The McCluskey case is a perfect example of what we were just talking about with the better lawyers. Initially, they're charged with a crime. She had a gun pointed toward the guy. They had a gun expert come in and they took his AR-15 to make sure it wasn't converted into a machine gun and so forth. They're doing all that stuff, but it's interesting that that couple, both attorneys that work in the edges of this in defense of people or prosecuting people that are doing some crime or something, fraud cases, I guess, predominantly. If you've watched them be interviewed, as time goes on, they're becoming more and more pro-gun.
Yes.
Less and less like
Yes.
they were before, realizing that they had guns, which the Second Amendment lets them have, and if they didn't have those guns, they would likely be dead at this moment from that mob crashing through the front gate to their community, where their house happens to be directly on the other side of the gate. I don't think the mob was looking for them particularly. They were just looking at the first house they ran into when they smashed through the gate. And the left side media left all the pictures of the gate being smashed, et cetera, out of their reports. And only a couple of news media, said, look, wait a minute, there was a steel gate there that was shut, and these guys busted through the gate, and they were directly in front of this house where these people were living, screaming. They're going to, if they heard the dog barking, they're going to kill the dog. They're going to, do this, do that. Which rooms in the house they were going to be living in after they murdered the couple. Was that a clear self-defense shooting? Yes, it was. Clear self-defense, aiming of a firearm. Aiming of a firearm. They didn't even shoot anybody. And look what they're going through. They're turning into right-wingers as we speak.
Let's go to the next slide, because that prints this next point. The governor of the Attorney General of the state of Arkansas has written a very elegant and eloquent statement. Here's the direct quote, which goes to the heart of what Bob's talking about. And the founders knew that the right of the citizens to bear arms was essential to the preservation of democracy and liberty. So, Bob, is this now becoming more than a right to bear arms issue and one of the people having to preserve democracy and liberty as we know it?
Well, yeah, they're preserving, initially this starts out with them preserving their own lives and protecting their own property. And, we can get into a long discussion about defending property with a firearm or deadly force is a separate issue. We may get into that in this story, but whether we are looking at having to have a gun to keep America together is a frightful thing to put onto a broadcast. I believe that if the left side of this, Joe Biden and his crew and the Democrats win the election and the various protections of the Second Amendment go away, and that is what they're advocating, of course, that nobody should have a military type gun and nobody should have, a magazine that holds more than 7 shots or 10 shots, whatever. There's a whole lot of different laws that they're planning to put into effect. But we're going to find that out if Biden wins and his slew of people are put into the cabinet, if Beto O'Rourke really becomes the gun czar with the ability at cabinet level to make unilateral decisions to confiscate firearms that he doesn't like. I rue the day that happens. We cannot have the left side win this election We've got to vote.
Let's go to the next slide because this is an excellent, we've had over the past, in my experience as an attorney in California and Nevada, I have noted and I've spoken to a number of federal firearms licensees in Clark County, Nevada. We've noticed a dramatic increase in background denials for women. Next slide, please. Now, in these, when we've had a proportionate increase in denials of background checks for women for various reasons, we also see what can only be as a dramatic increase in the number of guns, for firearms background checks. And according to this slide from the National Rifle Association and the statistics from the FBI, we've had 8.139 million background checks to date in California, in the United States. Bob, have you ever seen such an increase of the number of background checks in a 9-month period in your professional career?
I have seen similar, not quite to this degree. After the October 1 shootings, we had a huge spike years before when we've had major crimes happen like that just scared the hell out of everybody, that they could be a victim. These huge events where somebody totally innocent, they're just walking by, gets killed. And that causes more people to buy firearms. By definition, the male part of the population generally owns more guns than the female part of the population. They're nicer and whatever, and don't all get involved in guns. So I think we're seeing that increase because of the vulnerability they're feeling when now suddenly they're seeing innocent people attacked for no apparent reason, be they police officers or civilians. We just had another case here where a woman was shot over a road rage incident. They're still looking for the guy that just pulled up next to and shot a woman apparently because he thought he was being cut off in traffic. The police thought it was a car wreck, and when they got into investigating, they discovered that she had a bullet lodged in her brain. That whoever was the antagonist, who they're still looking for, I understand, it was a road rage murder. The couple of things are happening here. We're getting a larger percent of the population who never owned a gun before and don't know what the rules are. So the women go in and they don't know that they can't pass a background check because they had a traffic ticket 10 years ago and they're still a fugitive from justice, and they have to get that in another state, and that has to get cleared up before they can get their background check complete. Things like that. Their boyfriend or husband, they want to buy a gun. The husband can't for whatever reason. The woman then is told by her husband or boyfriend or on her own, says, well, I'll go get the gun. And she goes to get a gun, not realizing that there are restrictions that she's not aware of, and she can't pass the background check. There are a number of reasons. They're first-time buyers and simply don't know the rules. They get themselves in trouble. We found a number of cases where the husband goes to the gun store. We turn him down because of his background. He sends his girlfriend to another gun shop to buy a gun. She gets flagged because of the address, that we have a felon living at the address and so forth and so on, and she gets in trouble, not knowing that she couldn't buy a gun or they couldn't have a gun because we have a rule about a felon living in the same house, which obviously can be argued and should be. It's access to the gun that's the problem, not whether he's in the house or not. But anyway, we have a lot of reason why first-time buyers are tripping over things in the system because they're not aware of it. That's the issue.
Let's go to the next point, please, the next slide. So I know this is kind of hard to see, but the point is of this slide is that it shows, and if your viewers and listeners want to get this from me, or they can contact me through the website or call me on my cellular at area code 702-409-8239. We can send them a copy of this slide, which shows the steady increase of the number of background checks from the year 1999 up to the present time. The next slide, please. Now, what I've seen in my practice, and I'm going to have some comment. I'm going to ask for some comments from Bob, is that lately I have seen that there has been what I can consider generically as increased enforcement of the laws pertaining to prohibited persons. I believe that there has been some sort of mass update of criminal records, because I've been seeing in the past 30 days a number of records going back 30 years, about an average of 20 to 30 years of people who had problems back then, but more recently, let's say in the past 6 months, had actually obtained some firearms. I've seen more enforcement where people are making multiple purchases of firearms. We're talking several guns in the same day, or even multiple purchases of lower receivers for long guns and semi-automatic pistols. Now, for your audience who is unaware, the actual lower receiver of a semi-automatic rifle and the lower receiver of a semi-automatic pistol is what is registered because it has the serial number. You can buy slides or upper receivers all day long on the internet, but when you combine those two, that becomes the firearm. So, Bob, do you also see that there are problems, or can you explain why there's been what appears to be an increase in enforcement by the FBI and or ATF? Is it because of the time in which we're living?
It's generally caused by the crime rate. It's them putting those agencies putting more investigators and more strike teams into neighborhoods or areas or cities that are having a spike in crime. One of the things that you do in law enforcement when you have a particular county or something in a particular state or a particular district in that county where you have a humongous increase in crime, you send in more officers, more people to do background checks, more FBI to look into backgrounds, more ATF to do undercover stings and so forth and so on. If you're a cop, you go to where the crime is being committed, of course. So there is going to be an increase in crime like that where the high crime starts, crime gets even higher if you keep track of arrest statistics. More people are being arrested in areas where there's higher crime. Duh, of course they are.
Yes, Bob, when you and I are at gun shows, we are frequently asked, may I purchase more than one AR-15 or AK-47 type rifle, or may I purchase as many pistols as I want? And we answer, well, of course. Now, for the average Joe who comes to the gun show or who contacts us, when the question is asked, may we purchase multiple firearms on a single day, what would be your generic answer to these people?
Yes, of course you can.
But as a practical matter, what would you give them any other advice?
I would give them the advice that is probably going to cause some agency in the county, state, or federal level taking a look at them to see if they have any criminal history. Naturally, the police are going to do that. Is it intrusive? Yes. Should they be allowed to do that? It depends on the situation and the crime rate in the area you live in. Someone can come to a gun show now, and if he believes that AR-15s are going to be outlawed by the Biden administration, and he wants to buy 15 receivers because he thinks that only new purchases will be outlawed, but the old ones will be allowed to be kept. Then he's doing it for an investment. He buys something that he knows is going to be illegal 3 months from now, but it's not illegal for him to resell that because he already owned it. That's a very narrow group of people, but the ones that believe that are going to buy a whole pile of guns. It's simply a financial decision. Buy silver because it's going up, buy gold because it's going up, buy guns because they're going up. If that narrow scenario happens where you can still sell ones that you purchased prior to the ban. Reality, folks, if we get that ban, they're going to allow no sales. You're not going to be able to transfer them to somebody else, just my best guess. But if they get this through, the ones that you have, if they don't confiscate them, you're just stuck with them. And how many of those can you shoot recreationally in a week? You know, you can't.
Exactly. And Bob has raised a very important, timely issue. We're talking 128 hours old issue, and that is the status of the magazine ban in California. May we have the next slide, please? In August of 2020, a divided panel, 2 judges against 1 judge, of the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit made a ruling in the case called Duncan versus Bashera. By way of history, Ms. Duncan had filed a lawsuit in the United States District Court for the District of San Diego. It was assigned to Judge Benitez, who was appointed by President Bush. Now, Judge Benitez had stated and granted an injunction which prohibited the state of California from enforcing its magazine ban, defined, and Bob can speak to that in just a moment, defined as a magazine which can hold more than 10 rounds, AK-47, AR-15, Glocks, Springfield Armory, whatever type. So the judge issued an injunction. The state of California filed an appeal. And they also asked Judge Benitez to hold off on his decision until the appeal was finalized. So Judge Benitez gave them a few days gave the buyers in California a few days, about a year and a half ago, to hold off on they can complete their current purchases, but the importation of others after a particular day would not fall under the judge's order. So the case went to the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, which sits primarily in San Francisco, although they have had arguments in other cities like Pasadena and up in Washington State. But in August 2020, the panel, the 2 judges, ruled that the injunction issued by Judge Benitez was valid. The other member of this panel said that it was invalid. But here's what they wrote. And here's Judge Lee's decision, if we can have the next point. And this is Judge Lee of the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. And he wrote that this ban criminalizes the possession of half of all the magazines in America today. It makes unlawful magazines that are commonly used in handguns by law-abiding citizens for self-defense. And it substantially burdens the core right of self-defense guaranteed to the people under the Second Amendment. Now, why is this important? Because remember back around 2016, there was a case called Plcaa versus Bashera. And Plcaa had filed a lawsuit in San Diego challenging the fact that he could not get a concealed weapon permit because in California is a discretionary state. You must show a need and good cause. And that went to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, which issued its ruling in June of that year, which sent shockwaves through the United States. Now, the significant point of that decision was that the divided panel, 2 against 1, stated that there is no Second Amendment right to a concealed weapon permit. Let me repeat. There is no Second Amendment right to a concealed weapon permit. Contrast that decision with Judge Lee's writings in August of 2020 when he talks about self-defense as a core right of the Second Amendment. What Judge Lee has done very, very carefully and in a very, very ingenious manner as he has made the Second Amendment a core right and says that this law burdens the Second Amendment. You could read other decisions across the country, like in Maryland and Virginia and Pennsylvania, when they're talking about what is the proper standard by which a court must review a Second Amendment claim. And they're saying it's a lower standard, but there's nothing in the Constitution which says that any amendment is more cherished than another. They're all equal. They're all equal until they are abolished by appropriate action, by a vote of the states of the United States, by the Convention of States, and by Congress. So Judge Lee has made a great point. Now, Bob is talking about the magazine ban because just within the past week, the 17 states have joined the state of California to support the magazine ban. Nevada did not join in that group, and that was as of the 18th of September. And those 17 states are citing various reasons. But let me tell you, this thing was not overnight. I've read every single brief by each of these states' attorney general, and they're all stating a little bit something different. But the bottom line is that, you know, these assault rifles, these military type rifles are why we have problems in the United States. And they are deflecting the attention of the full panel, NBANC, E-N-B-A-N-C, because the state of California has asked the full panel of the Ninth Circuit to rule on this. And we have more liberal judges in the entire Ninth Circuit than you have conservative judges. So I expect that there's a 50-50 chance that Judge Benitez's injunction on a civil issue will be reversed. Because an injunction is not a decision on the merits unless it's gone to the trial, and this is what happened. So if it goes back before Judge Benitez can say, okay, we're going to have a trial. Well, it'll be a trial with him alone. If he issues his ruling again, it goes back to the Ninth Circuit. But I have a feeling before that, somebody's going to ask the U.S. Supreme Court. And look what's happening before the Supreme Court. Justice Ginsburg, bless her heart, died the other day. And that's leaving open another point. Now, we've had a few cases before the Supreme Court in which the Supreme Court has denied the opportunity to have these cases fully briefed. We have to ask ourselves why. And I don't think it is a conservative liberal issue. What I believe it is, they're looking for the right case, and Duncan versus Bashera is the right case for this. So, Bob, your thoughts on a possible magazine ban for the next legislature in Nevada?
Well, I'm sure that it will be brought up. I expect there are several bills already written that will do that pending the outcome of the election, whether they can get that through the next legislature. We're still going to have our same governor. He's not up for election, unfortunately. But of course, it is going to be brought up. And if we end up with more Democrats again, and bulletproof majorities in the Democrat and the governor's office, Nevada will become another one of those greatly restricted states. We are just, there's no way around it. So, well, there is a way around it, which is voting, of course. The banning a consumer product that is not in itself doing anything wrong, we're only dealing with politicians who say, well, if you have a high-capacity magazine and you have a modern sporting rifle that looks like an M16, that because they look lousy means they're dangerous. And we all know that's better. I own AR-15s. Owned them basically since AR-15s existed, and none of them have ever jumped up and shot anybody. It's the people that are the problem that are pulling the trigger, not the individuals, and taking magazines or guns away from somebody because it looks bad, or somebody else who's already dead or in prison misused it, is absolute lunacy. But that's what we're looking at, and we're looking at not having the right to defend yourself. That becomes the huge issue.
Let's go to the next point, please. Now, at gun shows, Bob and I talk about background checks and the types. Now, Bob and I have received a number of phone calls over the past several weeks on the background checks. So we need to reinforce Nevada's law, reinforce our points on Nevada's law, and I'll have Bob answer some comments and just have some comments in a moment. Nevada law mandates background checks on all firearm sales except those specifically excluded by statute. Now, the sale or gift to an in-law requires a background check. A sale or gift to your sister does not. A sale or gift to your adopted son does not. It's got to be a blood relation or by marriage, and that's not including in-laws. And again, we have a lot of people who are calling us. A private purchase by a CCW holder must go through a background check if it's a private sale, private seller, private purchaser holds a CCW. And I know that right now, if I have a CCW, which I do, if I go to a federal firearms dealer and buy from that dealer's stock, whether it's a new weapon or a used weapon, I do not go through a background check per se, although I do fill out the Form 4473. But if Bob and I go and I want to buy Bob's 1911, a Singer, model 1911, made in 1941, and they only made about 1,000 of them, they're very rare, I still have to go through a background check because that's the law. So Bob, have you, as a consultant, been receiving any questions or any inquiries concerning the background check law applicability in Nevada for private sales?
Well, yeah, and when it's explained to people that how it has to be a blood relative, and that blood relative needs to be living in your house, not in Utah, and sort of all the details of it. There's case law that is really complicated on a lot of that stuff, but if the dealer says you need a background check, they keep up with that. You need a background check. There's no point in screaming at the dealer. It ain't his law. As a dealer, I'm not one anymore, as you know, I'm retired, but, I like the background checks personally because I don't know the guy from Adam, and if he's a criminal, I'd really rather not sell him a gun. If he's a felon, I'd really not rather sell him a gun. There are dealers, supposedly here and there, that have licenses that sell to felons and whatnot all the time, and hopefully they're being put out of business because none of us on the pro-gun side are interested in arming criminals who are going to create problems with those guns. There have been a few dealers that have over the years, and they've been swept up by ATF pretty quickly. But we all feel responsible when we sell a gun to somebody, and later on that gun changes hands, or the guy goes through some traumatic experience in his life and he does something really stupid with the gun, and we all second guess ourselves, well, maybe if I'd asked one more question or whatever, it would have gone right. But of course people change, and somebody who's on an even keel when they're in your store may be a stone cold drunk 3 months later and involved in some emotional incident where he misuses the gun. Those are going to happen. Because those happen, that brings up a point that I want to talk about briefly that Don did not actually have on his outline. And that is the Plcaa, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Firearms Act. One of the things that Biden and his buddies have decided to get rid of is this act which says a licensed dealer or manufacturer, distributor who sells a gun under legal circumstances, doesn't cut any corners, cannot be held responsible for misuse of the firearm that he sold, that he entered into commerce. One of Biden's things is to have Beto O'Rourke be his gun czar and get rid of all these guns. And if they void the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Firearms Act, which they've said they're going to, you don't have to worry about anything else we're talking about. There'll be no guns for sale anywhere in the United States the next day. Because if we're held liable for people misusing a gun because we entered it into commerce, we sold it. Doesn't matter if it was stolen, has changed hands 17 times, we are still being held responsible for that gun. There can be no insurance for that. The whole gun industry will close within 24 hours. We're over. This is the biggest reason you got to get rid of Biden. The guns you have, you're going to own them forever because you can't sell them. And any ones that, of course, they're going to confiscate the ones they think look bad, so those are gone anyway. That's going to end the gun industry. You don't got to worry about how many bullets go in your magazine. Yeah, they got me saying it now. Cartridges go in your magazine. This is a really serious election. Donald Trump has said he will protect the Second Amendment. Joe Biden and his crew have said they will destroy the Second Amendment. So all you blue dog Democrats that own guns, you better vote for the R's all the way down their ballot, or we're going to be talking to ourselves on these shows about what we used to do before we lost all our guns. It won't be as interesting to listen to. Don and I can swap stories about what we used to shoot when we owned guns. He can talk about the clients that he has that he's trying to defend, but they're going to jail because they changed the law. And they can pay him for all the defense they want, and they're violating the law. I want to cut off and address one other issue, Don.
Absolutely.
Was not on the thing. Because this is so important, this election, and now we have Judge Ginsburg being replaced. Hard to replace somebody who's that smart on most issues, even though, as Don said, I disagreed with her most of the time. Her decisions were well thought out from the left-wing side. There's been research done because all the left is yelling now that President Trump should not fill that vacancy because she didn't want the vacancy filled until there was a new president. Well, that could be 6 years now. Yeah. They're presuming Trump isn't going to be reelected. But research was done, and how this issue is so wrong. Researcher reporter named Don McLaughlin reported yesterday in nationalreview.com that 29 times in history there was a vacancy on the Supreme Court during an election year. 29 times this has happened in the history of the United States. In all 29 times, the lame duck president, the guy who was not rerunning for office or was going to end up being defeated or whatever, made the nomination to fill that seat and sent it over to Congress. 29 times out of 29 times. Case law and history says President Trump should make that appointment to replace, so we don't have a Supreme Court with 8 people on it, because if we do, we're going to have 4-4, no action on everything that's coming up to the Supreme Court forever. We have to fill that seat. Not waiting for the new administration is not what is normally done. Normally done is the president in office is naming that person and sending that over to the Senate for advice and consent, and the Senate has advised and consented 29 times out of 29 times. It needs to be done. because otherwise we are going to lose America. Beyond that, what do you got, Don?
May we have the next slide? In case you're uncertain about your background or to prevent a delay in your firearms purchase, you can call me and we'll walk through this. Call me on my cellular at 702-409-8239. May we have the last video? This is the woman who stole a beer from a couple at a table back east. I'm going to ask Bob a question about this in just a moment. There's further disturbances concerning this. And you can see this rather graphic video. Bob, from a self-defense standpoint, if I'm having a beer outside here in Las Vegas, Clark County, Nevada, and a protester comes up and grabs my beer and drinks it, may I use my firearm against that person?
The joke here, is it a Bud Light or some other less tasty beer? Obviously, the question of whether you can use deadly force in pointing your gun or using it is if your life is in danger or you're in danger of great bodily harm. Clearly, you are not in danger of death or great bodily harm when someone drinks your beer and walks away. There's no question.
But
You hire Don Green, you're still going to lose the case.
But isn't the beer property?
The beer is property.
And isn't it being taken away from me?
Yes.
Can I defend my property?
No, not with deadly force.
Exactly. And explain that more again to the listeners and your viewing audience.
Deadly force or threat of deadly force can only be used to prevent injury or death or the likelihood of injury or death to human beings. That's it. You cannot use deadly force to defend your dog, defend your beer, defend your whatever, your lamp. You know, if they're in your house, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, they're charging you, you're defending your life. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, they've grabbed your lamp and they're running out the door with your lamp. No deadly force. Sometimes, in many cases, like the one I just said, there's a timing issue. You're drawing your gun to fire in self-defense. They see the gun. They're turning away from you at the same time. He can turn faster than you can bring your gun up, and the bullets hit him in the side or the back or whatever. But those are what we argue out in court, how the timing worked and whether it was reasonable at the time you fired your gun in your brain rather than the time you fired your gun when that signal actually got to your finger and said, stop pulling the trigger. But those are the cases where you need Don Green and you may need an expert witness. But if your life is not in danger by the circumstances of the overall event, you cannot use deadly force. Your gun is always deadly force. I was going to only shoot him a little bit. I was going to shoot him in the leg, or I shot him in the leg. Was that deadly force? Can people die for being shot in the leg?
Sure.
Yes, of course. Also, that was really a bad shot because you know what happens? If you had the presence of mind to intentionally only shoot him in the leg, did you have to shoot him at all? That's the question. You had time to go, wait a minute, I'll just shoot, over here or over there. Warning shots can be deadly force depending on where that bullet lands. And
it can be murder depending on where that bullet lands.
And it can be a shot to wound, as Don says, depending on where that bullet lands. Every bullet you fire has a lawyer attached to it with a string, and here comes the lawsuit.
Bob, protester grabs the beer while I'm at the table. Can I grab or reach for my weapon? Answer yes or no.
Yes, but it's really stupid. You don't actually bring the gun to bear. You don't tell him you're going to shoot him. You just grab your gun in case he does something else, but don't unholster it. probably nothing will happen to you. That's not a crime really to do that. But it's not a good path to go down, because it's so easy to draw the gun because that's what you're used to doing. You know, if something really gruesome isn't happening, leave your hand off your gun.
That's right. Well, Bob, I want to thank you. This was a lot of information was presented to your viewers and listeners today on a number of areas involving firearms and the Second Amendment. And we wanted to give you the latest takes on what we believe and what we be presenting at the gun show. Again, part of our public service to bring the gun show to you, because we haven't had any in Nevada since January. But I want to thank Bob, and on the streamers below us, you may see Bob's contact information and my contact information, and you're welcome to see us. Again, we want to thank the staff and videographers and at Rigel Studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I want to thank Bob Irwin for being allowing me, we're mutual guests today. And thank you so much.
Thanks from me too. I'll be back on Thursday around 5 in the afternoon with a standard edition of Fired Up. Fired Up with Bob Irwin. Check it out on your computer. I'll be there. Have a great week.